You are listening to The Reference Desk, the Wicomico Libraries podcast that connects you to your public library. Welcome back to The Reference Desk, Wicomico County Libraries podcast, connecting you with your public library. This month we have a guest star in the person of none other than our county director, Seth Hershberger.
Hi.
He's here to talk about the upcoming program, One Maryland, One Book, which will launch in September, and features a variety of programs where you can participate in a statewide book club. This year, the chosen book is called What's Mine and Yours by Naima Coster. Books are available to pick up for free from any of our county branches, Sarbanes, Pittsville, or Center, while supplies last. And I believe they start in August, correct?
That's right.
In August. The novel follows the lives of four main characters, Lacey, Jade, Guy, is it Guy or G?
I think it's G.
Okay, G and Noelle. There are many other supportive characters as well. Above all, this is a story of overcoming adversity, love, forgiveness, and acceptance. To quote the description of the book, What's Mine and Yours is an expansive yet intimate multi-generational tapestry of motherhood, identity, and the legacies we inherit. So Seth, would you like to talk a little bit about?
So that's one of the benefits of listening to the audiobook version is you get a
You
sense
get to
of how
hear it.
to pronounce the names and so forth.
That's fair, that's fair.
I think a lot of people that read a lot sometimes mispronounce the words because we've never heard the word said.
To me personally, it was Hermione until I listened to watched the movie and they were like, it's Hermione. I'm like, oh really?
Now, I do speed the audiobooks up a lot, so
Yeah, I do that too.
sometimes that'll cause you to miss a pronunciation.
Like Alvin and the Chipmunk speed?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty much. I go 2.0, sometimes 2.2.
Ooh, you live on the edge.
Really wanting to roll fast.
That's fair.
And this was a good book to listen on audiobook because it was so full of witty dialogue. And just
The dialogue was
conversation.
something that was really,
Yeah.
really interesting, I found.
Yeah, for me, that was a strong point of the book, was just how witty and funny it was.
Right. I would say don't listen with young, impressionable children in the car.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, this is a book for adults.
It is definitely for adults.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those, if you're reading it, that's fine. If you're listening to the audiobook, you might want to do that with headphones.
Yeah, some parental guidance at least.
There's a couple of situations that are...
Yeah, for sure. But I really liked this book. I mean, you've got two families that you're kind of following along, and they're not connected for a long time. I mean, that was what was sort of strange to me about the book at first, because there were so many characters,
and I was like, when are they going to meet?
Too many. There. It seemed like a lot, and then there were two families, and they were just kind of, the two families were running side by side, and you wondered if they were ever going to.
Right. Yeah. You're reading it like halfway through. You're like, are these two ever going to meet up? Because like the book promises, the back cover promises they will.
Right.
And I'm like, where is it? But it does. When they do. They meet up. They meet.
Right. Yes, they do. So the latter part of the book is very different from the first part, I guess, in that way. It feels a bit more focused, but the book jumps around a lot too.
It does.
What
It
did
goes
you think
time
about that?
because you start in, and I was actually a little surprised because it was mentioning integration, and it started in 1992, and I'm like, hold up. I was alive during that point.
Right.
And to me, because it was rural North Carolina, so it was a little bit in their own little world. But yeah, I thought the time jumping was interesting. It wasn't super jarring. It wasn't like some novels where you've read time jumps and it's like you have 3 pages on this one time frame and then it jumps again. It gets a little bit disorienting, but it was a nice, you really had, there was a reason you were in this time frame.
Right.
Because in the next jump it explains either why that affected them in that part or why that part affected the next part.
Right.
And I really thought that was well done.
Right. Exactly. And the book, even though it gets a little confusing at times with the jumping around, it's not like it's a hard or confusing book. It's fairly straightforward. The characters are plain. And I would say a lot of the things that happen are not surprising. It plays out fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
It's very plausible sort of scenario.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely something like you could see this happening. And you've probably seen this happening to someone in your life in some form.
Yeah. And the characters are realistic, too.
They really are. And they're flawed.
Right.
And the reason they do the way things they do, sometimes you're like, why are you doing that? But in their mind, this makes perfect sense.
Right.
Because of the situations. And like I said, it's a lot about intergenerational trauma and how the trauma of the two older characters, Jade and Lacey, how their background and the trauma they've been through, they do things with their children because of that trauma, and they don't realize how it affects their kids in a negative way.
Right. And I think even though G is the person in the book that I think you admire most, or at least I did, and identified with the most, and understood him the best, it's not like the book has villains in it. There's people that do bad things, and there are people that do good things, and sometimes they're the same person at different times.
Yes.
And everybody's very understandable. Like, you understand why people are behaving in the way that they behave.
Yeah, and even the people who are, like, quote unquote, not making good decisions, like it's that you can still see why they do it.
Right.
Because the author does take pains to go into the mind of these characters as they make these decisions, and you're like, oh, okay, so this is why I know why it's bad, but I know why she's doing it too.
Right.
There's a couple situations where I'm like, girl, stop. And you're like, but you know what? This is how they're in that fight or flight.
Right.
Like, they got to do what they got to do to survive and take care of their children.
Right.
And that's the primary thing that I took away from that first half of the book is, like, you do what you got to do to make sure your children are fine.
Right.
Even if it's lie to them.
Mm-hmm. And yes, that's right. And I think there are two parts of the book that sort of stand out to me the most. And it won't be giving anything away to talk about those two bits just a little. The first is when the two families do finally collide, and you don't fully understand that that's what's happening. But it's this very poignant scene in which, it's school, and they're trying to integrate, and the families that would attend this integrated school are doing that. And you just get very real, raw emotions.
They actually kind of meet earlier in the book.
Okay, you're right.
I'm just saying,
right.
He's mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I think this is sort of the scene where it's very...
Well, they actually are interacting together, and they're not in the periphery of each other's worlds.
Right. So
but if you can pick that out, kudos.
That was a very sharply written part of the book, though. And it goes on for quite a bit of a chapter, that particular scene. And then another highlight for me was near the end, and it's really kind of the latter part of the book in which the Shakespeare play just becomes like so central to everything.
Yes.
And they really dig into that play, and you learn a lot about the play. A play I've not seen, but I'm very curious to read it now.
It's Measure for Measure, yeah.
Yeah, by Shakespeare. So two of the primary characters are both cast in the play, in the school play, and they get to interact in that context about the play and about a complicated comedy. And all the human elements of that.
Yeah, and the interaction between G and his mother in regards to the play, not giving anything away.
Yeah.
It's where G starts to become his own person, and he starts to try to obviously move past the expectations that his mother has placed upon him.
Right.
And I think that was very moving to me as well. I'm like, wow, he go son, follow your dreams.
Yeah, I thought that was beautiful, that play becomes so important to the book, like just like a vehicle for
both of them.
Both of them, yeah. Self-exploration and for understanding their communities better and their families better. The play really, Shakespeare is just so amazing because, there's so much depth, even to what, like, on the surface looks like a comedy.
Right. A lot of it was written for the time, and it was actually, it's been posited that a lot of Shakespeare's plays are a lot more raunchy.
Yeah.
Than you would look at it on face value. You're like, dude, he was talking about X, Y, or Z, and that's completely, like, they would have thought that was hilarious because that's how they thought.
Right.
That was so funny.
Yeah, right.
I'm a fan of the Bard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and, I've mentioned this before, but it's one of the sort of revealing moments for me in the whole book came when they're trying to decide how they're going to stage the scene of the play, and the director says, we can do this, in a way that's festive, and it'll be kind of fun, and the audience will understand it, or we can do it strange, he said, which he thinks is the way Shakespeare intended it, and it's going to confuse the audience, he said, a little bit. They'll understand it. They might even think we're making mistakes.
Right.
But then the primary characters of the book are like, let's do it strange.
Yeah, let's do it weird because that's what it's... Yeah, so let's do it her way.
Yeah.
Because I remember that was what he said, and they gave him a weird look because they didn't expect him to side with her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, queen.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, and I think that's sort of this... I think that's important to the book itself. Like, I think that's what the author is trying to do, Naima Coster, with the story itself, is not try to make things too straightforward and make it a little confusing.
Oh, it was.
These are real people, and their motivations are not simple.
No, they're very relatable because any decision you make, even in your life, is going to be something that you have a plethora of factors that you have to think about. Yeah. And it only gets worse as you get older and you acquire people in your orbit. You have to be concerned about your family or your friends or just people you work with. You have to I know I can't do it this way because that person will be detrimented or, adversely affected by my decision. When you're younger, you don't have that.
Yeah.
And it's just black and white.
What do you think about this book for One Marilyn, One Book? Is it a good selection?
I think it's a great selection because it does bring out a lot of different, interactions between people, and it really makes you think about and not everything is right or wrong. It can be nuanced, and I think that's one thing that can be talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a good book club book, isn't it? Because there's so many people are going to have very different reads on the characters and kind of debate that,
and a lot of that's going to come down to their own personal experiences, because you will relate to people differently. I know I probably related to the struggles of a mom keeping her kids from knowing the troubles in there, because while I don't think I personally been in a position like that, if I ever was I would be I would do whatever it took to make sure my kids did not feel the struggle that I was feeling, because it's not their fault. And I related to that. Didn't quite relate to, G's struggle as much. But you based on your previous experiences in your life, you're going to relate to people differently.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I think that's going to make interesting conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the second One Marilyn, One Book read for me, and they're both books I probably wouldn't have picked up. And
What did you do last year?
That's what's so great. It was a book of short essays.
That was really fun. Yeah, I read a couple of them last year for our podcast. That was so fun.
Yeah, that was a great book. I loved it. In fact, I recommended it to several people and got a lot out of that book. But this book, too, is just something that I probably wouldn't have picked up. And that's what these programs are great, because they get people to read books they wouldn't normally read.
Get you out of your comfort zone. Read something a little more challenging than another Pride and Prejudice fanfic remake. That's my comfort read.
Yeah.
But it's definitely fun. Do we have any programs lined up yet?
I think that they are working on it.
Okay.
So there will be. We're going to have at least 3 programs throughout the One Marilyn, One Book.
Excellent.
That will be specifically focused on this book.
And if you ever need to know, you can just go into our events calendar on our website under the black tab. Is going to have events calendar. Click on that, and then you can just look it up by look for One Marilyn, One Book, and that'll be on the calendar. Whether you need to register, how to get there to do it, if it's in person, if it's virtual, or what have you.
Yeah, and we've got some cases of these books.
Yes,
sitting
lots
around already, don't we?
Yes, we have at least 2 at Center. Pretty sure Pittsville has the same, and I don't know how you guys probably have a whole bunch more. So definitely come pick up a free book anytime in August, and then we'll be able to get.
Yeah, free book. This is one you get to keep. You don't have to.
Yes.
Yeah, you can just keep it or share it. We're not expecting these books to be returned.
The best thing to do is read it, enjoy it, and pass it on to somebody else, because then it's kind of like you're loaning it from the library, but you don't have to give it to us. Give it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Seth. I do
appreciate
appreciate you being our guest star today, because I did not know enough about this book to talk about it. I mean, I read through it and I did get a general idea, but it's nice to have someone who's you've done 2 readings, which is impressive.
Yeah,
Very
it's a
good.
fun book to read.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us for this special edition podcast. Join us next month, where we talk all about the things we know about the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power series on Amazon, as well as some background information from J.R.R. Tolkien's Silmarillion. See you next time, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, all.
Future episodes may feature a variety of topics, ranging from storytelling, arts and crafts, reader's advisory, reference questions, discussion, and more. We also encourage feedback through our Facebook page or in the comment section on the podcast. Visit us online at www.wicomicolibraries.org. Search for Wicomico Libraries on your favorite podcasting site. You can call us at 410-546-5397, or you can email us at center@wicomico.org. That is CENTRE @wicomico.org.